one way or the other. So that's me. Jess, do you want to go next? I think Mark knows you, but just in case.
Yep.
Jess, you're on mute. Just,
Sorry, I was messing with the live stream. Yeah, I mean, I'm the project manager. I know Mark pretty well. Yeah, everyone else knows me.
Yep.
Yep.
All righty. Diana? You there? Oh, Josh has joined. Okay, Diana seems to have something going on. Martin, do you want to go next? Just take yourself off mute.
Certainly. Martin Robinson. I'm leading the finance group.
Okay. Brian, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Brian Duffy. I work for CTO and New York State ITS, focusing on workplace services. I think Mark, I think we met a very long time ago.
Yep.
We were at DOT maybe in those days. On
yeah,
probably
absolutely.
Nice to see you again.
You too.
Okay. Josh, do you want to go next?
Sure. I came a little late. Are we?
We're just in it. We're just saying who we are and a little bit of our background for Mark, so we get to know face to names.
Sure. My name is Josh Tossi. When I joined the commission, I was working at the local government level. So this was a very interesting topic to me. I don't work there anymore, but I'm still very interested, and I'm excited to talk to you and learn more, and hopefully bring a lot of improvements to the city of Albany.
Diana, you're up next.
Yes, hi, I'm sorry. I just had like an audio issue, so I had to connect again. Hello, Mark. My name is Diana. I currently work for NERIC in e-learning and instructional technologies, education technology for local school districts. When I joined the commission, I was working for Albany Public Library, so I had a little bit of a library science background. Before that, I worked for different IT companies, with my specialty being like web development and networking. And happy to be here part of the commission and learn more about you and your work. So thank you.
Good. No, thank you very much.
Okay. There are a couple of people who aren't here tonight who are part of the commission as well. For example, we also have Ed Hernandez, who actually amongst various roles worked for Spectrum on the broadband side for many years. Doesn't now. So he has a good background on that part of the field. Jeff Quain is the vice chair, and I think you're familiar with Jeff. He has he's done a great deal of development work here in the city. Yeah. We also have, though we haven't seen her in a while for health reasons, Caitlin Monjo, who is an attorney here in the city. So we hope she's able to rejoin us soon. She's been dealing with health issues for the better part of a year now, COVID being what it is. So hopefully she'll be back to us soon. Beyond that, we do have a couple of vacancies. Usually Luke is here as well. He's been a great deal of help to us, and he has definitely been able to provide us more of the city's view from an IT perspective, and has weighed in with a couple things that we should consider as we were developing the report. So the city staff has been great. And of course, we had the sustainability director that came to talk to us a few weeks ago. Yeah, and he was excellent. We had some questions specifically about the light pole purchase. So he was able to give us some great insight on that, and where that was trying to develop the different projects related to that, which I think dovetail really well with what we had hoped could tie in from a broadband point of view. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit, just because we definitely got your feedback, and thanks very much for that. You're the first one to get back to us. The Common Council hasn't weighed in with feedback yet. We will be meeting with them, and that's something I have to tell the entire group. We did get a communication from Ginny Farrell. They would like the commission to meet with Common Council at their caucus meeting on October 13th at 5:30. And that's the entire commission is invited. I suspect we'll be to talk about the report, respond to questions from the various people on the Common Council, and hopefully we'll get some meaningful feedback from their side then. My understanding is that the Research Council was working on something, but we have yet to actually see a written memo from that side. So with that said, Mark, if you'd like to speak a little bit to what you wrote and any questions that you might have for us based on the first
Sure.
draft.
No, perfect. Thanks for inviting me to participate. I'll give you a little background, quick background of myself. Born and raised City of Albany. Worked in, and I was just talking about this the other day, worked in every level of government in the state now. I don't know, I may be a bad employee because I worked at the county. I worked at New York State, several different agencies. You know, I'm old, I got a long career. But worked at ESD just recently, and then, you know, came with the city about, I think, just under 10 years ago now. So, you know, a lot of city employees I meet, you know, they've been here for 25, 30 years. So I'm kind of a newbie being only 10 years. But, you know, IT background, I'm not a politician. So forgive me on that. And you
Thank
can
God.
kind of figure that out, you know, in my memo to you guys. I tried to be, you know, as direct as possible. I certainly read your feedback and some of your questions, which are very good, and I appreciate. I want to start out by saying, in my memo, I offered a opinion, my thoughts based on my knowledge and experience. That's not the opinion, right? It's just one. That's all. That's how I offered it up anyway. That's how, you know,
Okay.
I wrote it, and that was my intention in there. Just the thought, you know, to put into the mix. I know we're on the same page on what we want to accomplish, because going back in, you know, 16 and 17, you know, when we did our first study, you know, I was even kind of reluctant to actually pay, you know, to have the city pay a company to actually do that study, because I'm saying we know what the problem is in the city. You know, we've got one provider. We don't have a lot of choice. The service, particularly on the broadband side, is not good.
Right.
You know, it's not reliable. It's not what we need. And that's going back in 2017, right before the pandemic. And, you know, the big shift to work from home and all of the other, you know, things that have, you know, put more pressure on the internet. So it's like, why do we even need a study? I mean, that basically is it. But that study went out, did confirmed what we already know, but also allowed us to get some numbers and some options together. So we could start to at least intelligently talk or think about what options may be there. So that was really the intent of that study, with this thought in mind. And I bring this up because it's something that you mentioned as well in your questions. There's going to be, you know, from a federal level, you know, money available for broadband through grants, right? Which, you know, like every other community, we certainly want to take advantage of. But with grants, we don't need, you know, what I would hope we wouldn't do is we don't need a grant to do another study, right? See, when Luke and Jessica have been participating in your meetings, I've been participating in meetings on the county side. right? On their broadband initiative. So because we don't want the city to be left out of that. I mean, certainly the county has needs, and they got more rural areas of the county that have broadband requirements, but we are also part of the county. So my representation on that side was, well, wait a minute, City of Albany's, we're still part of Albany County, because typically, as as I hope you know, and if you don't, usually with the federal grants, they're not coming direct to the city, right? To the state, you know that, and then usually to the county, right? And then the county gets to distribute, to municipalities within. So that was where my focus is. Because also the other thing that you guys may be surprised about, in the city, we have over 1,400 employees, 1,300 plus, 13, 16 plus different departments that we service, right? How many IT staff do you think we have?
4.
5.
Yep, I get 6,
including
myself. Right. And unlike the, let's say I'll pick on DGS commissioner, he's not out there paving roads, right?
Right.
Me, I'm in there setting up servers. I'm a working, I'm a working CITO technically, because we have a small staff. So that was one of the reasons why we split. And I asked, Jessica and Luke, hey, you work on this side, I'm going to work on this side, because we do have limited resources. And we do know grants are coming down the road. And usually, what do we need for a grant? Ideally, a solution and a cost, right? Which isn't just listen, I know we have a problem. I know, we have an equity problem. I know we have, broadband needs throughout our community that are not being met. We have to prove that, right? That was one of the good things that the first study did, and your study reinforced, definitely. And like I said, we already knew. But for grants, we have to have more than just what our opinions are, right? Here are the facts. All right, we want to have a solution. What solution do you want? Well, let's say we wanted to do fiber to the home for a grant. We have to have the cost. Right. The hard numbers, we have to have the value. And so in our study, our original study, and again, reinforced without the cost on your study, we have to have those hard numbers for that type of grant. So that was our type of focus. And one of the other things that we're trying to do is, while the grant requirements are being written and out there, what we're also trying to do, though, and you guys mentioned this as well, and Jason probably spoke of this, but we're trying to move forward with some other things, right? What can we afford to do, or who can we partner with? Like in the case of where I think I referenced, doing some Wi-Fi and streetlights in the pilot project, with the Power Authority, Jason and Jessica have been involved in that as well. Is that our solution? Like, this was a question you asked. You're like, do I think that is a solution to our problem? Absolutely not.
No.
Right? No, it's not.
But
it's a proof of concept of, hey, how can we do this even on a small scale? What's involved in providing Wi-Fi to certain areas of our community? How much is it costing for us to do that? And we have a partner in this case, the Power Authority, who's going to fund that for the most part, right? So that's that part of the, I just didn't want to, continue to do nothing.
Sure.
Right? Or continue to just to wait. Well, let's try some things, because we could even use that in our grant.
We've done a pilot,
right? Yeah, we did a pilot. It cost this. This is, successful. Or if it wasn't successful, the reason why we don't want to do this, right? The reason why we want to do something else is we attempted to do this, right? So that's some of the logic and theory behind that. But I don't want to keep just rattling off. If you have specific thoughts or questions that I may be able to help with, I want to be able to take this time
Great.
to do that.
Mark, I do have one question because I was a little confused when I was reading your what you wrote, which was great. It did touch on a lot of the things that we'd hope to hear back on from people. And recognizing that it is your point of view, the fact is yours is an incredibly valuable point of view, because within city government, you're the guy that has experience to speak to some of the tech aspects of this, and has the familiarity. So, you know, that's why we take it very seriously. We wanted to really address this and have you here to sort of have this exchange back and forth, because the goal is the same. I mean, what you said is true. Our goal is the same: to get broadband for the city. I'll briefly say that when the cable contract was up many years ago, and they made the decision to go with Spectrum as the sole source, I was one of the many voices that said that's a really bad idea for exactly this reason: service levels, performance, the effect on the market. There were reasons to go with it at that time. I don't think it had grown to the extent of being there weren't as many people looking to provide internet service in that way. But it was, well, don't go for as many years. Let's step this. Nope, that wasn't the way. But okay, we've moved past that. We recognize where we're at now, and that there are more choices available now. But do we still want to proceed this way as opposed to that way, or something in the middle of those two? In the preliminary recommendations that we made, the second bullet, we didn't suggest that we go with a hub and spoke model. We suggested going with a mesh network,
Right?
because the hub and spoke, which is the traditional model that most people think of when they think of city broadband. Some of the studies that we were seeing was saying that it's probably that the chief difference between the two is that the hub and spoke, when it breaks down, you lose service for a period of time to that whole area of the city at a minimum, versus the mesh network, which is being a redundant format.
Right.
The other two can pick it up, and you may lose some service, but you can usually keep it at a basic level service. Where we were thinking about the light poles was as, how can we lay out a mesh net, and how could a mesh network be laid out on the city, was one thought. The light poles were a possibility. Not just the 42 to 200 that the city owns, though that might be sufficient for a phase one of a municipal broadband project,
Yeah.
to serve those parts of the city with the greatest need. Let's call it that, being a lot of people on lower end income and fixed end incomes who normally can't afford private broadband now, and get it out to the homes, particularly in light of what occurred with the pandemic, where schools say, well, we can get you a laptop, but we can't necessarily get you the internet service to go with it. So that didn't do the kids a lot of good. They had to sit outside their homes near a car lot or some sales place that had Wi-Fi and hope that they could hook in. The fact that occurred in the cap city of the state of New York really, I think, upset us all. I know that I personally view that as somehow I failed my community. We shouldn't have that occurring here. So we took it personally, as I'm sure you did too. It's a professional thing, and it's a pride thing.
Mhm.
But it's so we felt that a mesh approach might help resolve that type of problem. The other thing is, when you talk about the city and the county, one of the things we've talked about early on is yes, we're aware of both commissions going on. The county got theirs up later than we were, but not by much. But the feeling was that anything that involved the city could potentially involve the county as a whole.
Sure.
So the idea is, are there rights of way that would allow the towns to hook in through something like a last mile network to a broadband setup that started in the city and then fanned out to the various parts of the county? If that approach worked, That's what led us to the idea of doing an authority. Now, you raised a good problem with that, which is, well, they changed the law at the state level to limit a city's ability to create new authorities. But if you had something, what I thought of was many years ago, many moons ago, we did the same thing with solid waste. We had the just consortium, and the city of Albany got money from the different towns to basically take the trash and put it in the landfill until we filled up the landfill, and now we've got a problem.
Yeah.
The nice thing about broadband is we don't have to worry about the landfill filling up, and no one, for the most part, is going to give us a hard time about citing trying to cite why, as long as we don't mess with the environment too much.
Right.
What there are fanning out from along the river and out into the county are railroad rights of way, some of which the county owns. Best example of that being the county rail extends all the way out through Voorheesville. They're trying to get the rights of way to go out further. So a lot of the towns like Altamont, Voorheesville, New Scotland, all the small towns that really need broadband as well, that goes right up through the middle of that corridor. And there are poles, not in great condition, as I can say as a person who's run that corridor, but there are poles all along both sides of that trail. So it's possible to run things through there. Now, the cost of doing that, we can say, well, that's going to be, money. But the question is, one of the recommendations we were considering to the city is to reach out to the state delegation to look at look at getting them to try and do a carve out within the authorities law, specifically for municipal broadband projects, which could be used as part of a grant request to the feds to say, listen, we've created a means specifically to support these kind of projects, sharing of technology, sharing of efforts across the county, not just the city.
Mm-hmm.
With the city of Albany, at least in theory, through the authority, we agree to manage it with staff that's added on the authority's payroll, not trying to bury further the 5 or 6 people that exist in the IT department of the city of Albany, because that would be ridiculous. But again, the added advantages being, one, we do a bit of an arm's length with the risk of creating a broadband network by creating the authority to manage it, because they have bond authority as well. They could they could apply for grants as well on behalf of the communities that are part of it. So it might make for a much stronger grant request. So we're saying, well, we're not just serving here, we're serving here, and here's how.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of a stepped approach. If that addresses some of the concerns that I know that you raised, is we think, because the state delegation has been very supportive of the city and has shown a great ability to get things done for the city at the state level that certainly involve technology and economic development. And as far as the setup of the technology side of the authority goes, we have an added benefit in that the Center for Technology at SUNY is based right here.
Yep.
And they are run by, and I can attest to this personally because one's my PhD advisor, the 4 foremost authorities in the world on smart city tech. So I've already spoken to them informally and said, well, if a request came from the city of Albany for help and guidance, would you do this? And they said, absolutely. We'd be completely on board. So we would have a partner there from the academic side, which might help add strength to our grant to our grant request as well. So my question is, do you think, in your experience, that the mesh approach might be a better approach to take than hub and spoke?
I think through our first survey, our first study that was done, which we engage a contractor to do on behalf of our city, and the school district was involved. SUNY Albany was involved. The Albany Public Library was involved. They had a team that worked with this contractor as well. Part of their recommendation, I believe, in that was, what they priced out was, a mesh network, and they also priced out a hub and spoke alternative.
Right.
I mean, one of the things I love about, as I said before, when I put out this memo, it was really in a very conversational form, right? Like if we're sitting here right now, right, you're giving me a thought on, fiber to the home, mesh type network possibly.
Right.
And I'm saying, hey, what about this or what about that?
Right.
And again, the good thing is our goal is, is certainly the same. It's like, how do we achieve it?
Yeah.
We could try a bunch of different things. One way that, that you're talking about, sounds great. And, and that is more, I'll say initially, more of a legislative type of path, right? We got to line up some ducks legislatively, to create, the right to create authority and all the steps and things involved in that, which I'm not an expert on. That's certainly, that sounds like
if we can pull it off. Yeah.
It sounds like a possible path, right?
Well, I think one thing there is, I just want to add one thing there. I mean, I participated in a project recently to help with, they're doing some stuff for the World Games. There's going to be in Lake Placid, right? And a big part of what they had to do to win the right to conduct those games, which was a real high legislative priority, was actually get a legislation change made to allow certain aspects of that contract to I believe it was about indemnification and stuff to be done. And even that, with that level of prioritization, that was a really high risk thing. It took longer than was expected, right? So it's difficult if we're working at getting grant funds, right? They're not going to be around for 5 years. So if we're counting on a state, finance law change by public authorities, that's a really high risk thing in terms of the timeline. It may be achievable, but the timeline that's tough. So that's a tough thing to bet on.
Which is why the other, why I talked about some things I did, going back to, I want to say, even before 2016, one of the first things we did was we sat down with Verizon, right? Because Verizon was rolling out Fios at that time in some communities, right? And we, asked Verizon, we invited Verizon, said, listen, we want another competitor in the city of Albany, whatever we could bring to the table, we were willing to do. And we got a memo back from, the mayor received a memo back from Verizon, basically saying we're not investing in the city of Albany, or they want to invest in certain parts of the city of Albany and exclude other parts of the city of Albany, right? Which certainly was not acceptable. Then we met with Google, right? Because Google was starting to roll out fiber, back at that time as well. And the first question that Google asked us was, do you own your poles in the city?
Yeah.
No, we don't. Done. They were polite, but they're basically saying, we're done. We're only working with communities that own their own poles, because to get the rights to hang something on a pole and blah, 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 is very difficult, time consuming. That's not the direction we're going in right now. So I bring that to the table because one of the things like we were talking about doing was when we were doing the street lights. And again, this is just one man's opinion, right? I was always trying to say there's extreme value in the pole.
Yeah.
Not just the street light. We saved a lot of money by replacing streetlights, and obviously we can leverage the streetlights because our pilot project is going to tell us that if we can, leverage the streetlights to provide from Wi-Fi. But I knew from the previous meetings that they had some value to them.
Sure.
They have a tremendous amount of liability to them as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Which, I'm not, thinking about that as much as other people probably are. but I knew they, could be and would be a valuable asset for us, but we don't own that asset. So my frame of mind of thinking was, one, we need to get broadband, and we should, and maybe your committee can do this. We should define what broadband is for us.
Sure.
Right? Let's not even let somebody else. I mean, the state has some definitions, but right now, Spectrum will say that they offer, what we refer to high-speed broadband.
No.
But it's, it's not symmetrical. It's, we're not getting guaranteed speeds up and down. That's what we need, in our community to function relatively, efficiently. So we should we should define that. And the other thing that was always the goal, because I knew right from the very beginning, was affordability. Yep. So even if we had Verizon come in with Fios, I'm not sure how many people could really even afford it. Right. So we needed to, have some type of commitment, either contractually or even, through the legislation, that, there was going to be some level of broadband affordable. So what is the quickest way to do that now? And I'm just thinking in my way, like you were thinking of yours from the authority perspective, which I think is a smart one. But I was just thinking, hey, listen, we have to partner with somebody. We have to partner with, with somebody that will get us what we need, which is high-speed broadband, affordable broadband throughout our whole community.
Yes.
And take advantage of any grants we could that are available very, in a relatively short window, right? Because that's part of the struggle with some of the money with the grants is, the community can't spend it quick enough because they're not ready.
Right.
I want to be ready. I want to, that's why I was recommending the RFI to see, is there anybody willing to partner with us? This is what here are what our needs are. Right. Which is what you're defining. Here's what we can bring to the table, like you're talking about. City doesn't own any fiber. Right. But we do own right of ways. Right. We do own buildings. And we can be a big customer as well, right? All bring value. Yeah. And also, maybe try to get some of our state entities that, exist in our community, bring them to the table as well to, for value, and say to anybody out there, like I said, we specifically talked to Verizon, specifically talked to Google, a couple other companies that were much smaller. Right. But we just put the RFI out there, tell them what we like to get as far as high-speed broadband, affordability, what we can bring to the table. We're looking for a partner, bring to the table may also include grants that they can't apply for, but we can, right? As a government entity, and we see what the answer is. I may be completely wrong. There may be no responses to it. It may be partners that are saying, hey,
we can do this, but not that, right?
We can do this, not that. I can meet this, can't meet that. Right. But I always thought that would still always help us, no matter what we wanted to do.
Yeah, right. Is that something that could be done? Like maybe doing something like that with the cooperation of the county and identifying like different blocks of like profiles. Like for example, in the city, you have like suburban like areas of the city. You have low rise, dense areas of the city. You have some mid-high rise. The county has rural and suburban, right? When I just spoke to someone from AWS today, and I spoke to someone Intel a while ago. There seems to be a ton of interest in, like I was talking to them about a campus level solution for 5G to extend, in larger environments like that are defined. This is a huge area right now. There's a lot of development happening. So you may end up with a different answer in some of the higher density areas, whereas out in Burn, right, you have to run fiber. Right. You can't run, there's no wireless solution for that. But if we could figure out a way to get the business model down, right? I mean, if I looked at like the ESD grants, Otsego County, right? We're talking Cooperstown, they leverage their electric cooperative. They awarded almost $4,000 per household to do last mile fiber. That's a lot of money. You could take, if you look at any block area, whatever the subdivision is within the city, are able to allocate $2,000 to $4,000, right? That's a lot of infrastructure, right? And if we can find an operator who's interested in rolling that out, and it sounds like, especially in the high density areas, there's a lot of stuff happening in that space right now, right? Because there's even with backhaul to, that, like, for example, Verizon is building out that millimeter wave network that nobody knows how to use, right? There's opportunities there. And I think you're right, though. An RFI, if we structure it right and get it to the right people, we may get a lot more answers. There's a lot of questions now. It may help answer some of them.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the only thing is, Mark, I'm sorry. I'll let you speak to that, but I just want to say Martin had his hand up, so let Martin go next once you respond to Brian.
Okay.
Sorry.
An interesting thing I had in my notes from just a few weeks ago that, even, Spectrum, Charter, who, traditionally provide us access over coax, there's even a standard out there now that they're going to be able to deliver 10G over coax.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay, let's say they can, and, Spectrum's not my favorite, but all right, let's say they can deliver what we need, high-speed broadband. They're already in a lot of our houses and communities, right? They obviously already have the rights to it. And now the technology is to the point where they can deliver much more broadband over that coax cable that's coming to our house. Then what do we need to do? We just need to negotiate affordability.
Yep.
Right? And we're off to the races on that.
Right.
So, that's a possibility. 5G, I had T-Mobile in a few weeks ago. T-Mobile's got 5G, ultra wide 5G, going in certain areas of our city right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like up off of Northern Boulevard, for example. On my phone, I was getting 125 megs up and down on my phone on their network. So technology's changing. That's one of the things, that I referenced in the memo as well. And I mean it in a positive sense, but there's so many changes, and like you're talking about, Brian, in technology that are happening so quickly that they're scaring me. Like, whoa, man, I was talking to Luke just the other day about this, of where we're always focusing on the last mile and, having gig connection, fiber connection into our homes. I think at some point, not too long, we're going to go out and buy gig internet connection, right? That's wireless.
Yeah.
You're going to be walking out your home on your phone, right? And still have your gig wireless network.
It's in Yankee Stadium right now.
Right. We don't want to be stuck into something when the future's so wide.
And I think I'll address that in a minute. I think one of us will. But I just want to go to Martin next, because I know Martin, you've got a question from the finance point of view, I would think.
Yes. So thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I did just want to bring up one thing about the cost. I did notice that was one of the things we didn't list specifically a cost. Didn't really do that because I wasn't really sure what exactly direction we were going, and wasn't really sure if it would be appropriate to cite a cost if we didn't have that direction. In the report, there is a reference to basically one municipality that's been able to, provide direct fiber optic cable to each home at a price of about, $3,200 per home, and multiply that, there's about 48,000 homes in the city of Albany. And if we just use that rough number, that basically equates to 170 million. So I just wasn't sure if I should be using that number if we weren't sure what we were designing. Yeah. But I think my questions have to do with, hypothetically, if we're able to develop the infrastructure, would the city be able to, build the capacity to basically have an IT staff, to assist with, customer service, assuming that, we have appropriate startup cost.
Right. No, I think that's, that's a great question. And I think part of what Craig was talking about as well, if we look at, kind of the traditional authorities, let's take water, for example, right? It's an authority.
Yeah.
It's managed obviously within the city and, quasi, I guess, with the mayor's office, but they're a separate authority, right? They have their own budget, they have their own tax authority, they have their own staff, right?
But they contract the staffing to the city, right? The city actually provides the people.
Yeah, in a lot of cases. So I think one of the things we would have to, do is, that authority, especially if the thought is perhaps even expanding the boundaries of, the service outside the city, is that authority has a staff. So you staff up, that way, not on the city payroll, for example. But logistically, those are the things that would have to be worked out. But Martin, one of the other things that we were talking about as far as cost goes, when we had Verizon back in asking them, if they would come into the city, at that time, they were talking about they were estimating a 35 to $45 million, capital investment, basically to get the fiber on the poles. Of course, they already have the back end infrastructure, right? Which we would have to build. But, to get the fibers run on the poles, getting the last mile, from the pole into the house type thing. They were talking about an investment like that. That's what they were running their numbers. So they were running the numbers saying, hey, listen, how many subscribers do we think we would get to this service based, on the $40 million or $45 million that we would have to invest. So that was a number that they came up with. In our study, that vendor, which was a separate vendor because Verizon, I think, was 2 or 3 years before we got the study done, they came up with a number that wasn't that far off from what Verizon was talking about, as far as what would be a capital investment in infrastructure. Again, not staffing up the authority, we would still have to do maintenance and, and everything like that we would have to consider. So I assume it would be more money than that. But when we're going for any type of grants or anything like that, I think, the important part is kind of identify what you want, but an equally important part is ruling out other options, right? Like, let's say the state is reluctant, to move and create some type of right to do an authority, right? If we already said, hey, listen, we did an RFI and we reached out and, the response was terrible. There was no good solution. We don't have another option, right? We exhausted another option. So that is an important aspect as well, kind of ruling out other things. Or, as Brian's talking about, there may be something that kind of surprises us, for a technology solution. I mean, I'm really interested in seeing, although it's on a much limited basis, but I'm really interested to see on the Wi-Fi on the streetlights, because it's a mesh, it's a smaller mesh, but it's going to be based on a mesh network. It's going to be directly in our community. We're going to have people use it, have the ability to use it at no cost. That will be interesting to see.
Okay. Just to sort of build on that for a second, then I'm going to see if Diana's got a question or if Josh has got a question. With what Brian said and what you've been saying is, yes, we don't know what's coming out, and the technology is moving along so quickly. And I think that's one of the things we said. The advantage with not doing the commitment to a multi-year contract with one provider who's locked into one technology is the advantage of taking, again, the authority approach is they have the ability to set up contracts. If, let's say we create an authority, and the authority contracts with the actual provider of the fiber or the service. It says, okay, we're going to give you this, it's for this length, and we have a clause for technology improvement, for technology improves, and we can then and then phase. What I like about the light pole project is I agree totally. At a minimum, it could be a proof of concept, saying, okay, we've done this, we've proven the concept works. For the area that we did, this is the response that we got, and this is what we saw. The thing which I'll just add, because I'm sure that one of us in the group will if I don't. One of the things we agreed upon as a group, basically from day one, was in an ideal world, from our point of view, there needed to be a tier for people, considering people on fixed and limited incomes, that would provide free service, but not lower quality of service
Right.
to those people. We all get the same high speed as minimum. Just because you're trying to pay for food doesn't mean that you don't need and don't want the internet service, and that you shouldn't have that. So our goal, and we found one community that's actually doing it out in Colorado, was to provide a level that is that. Many communities provide a lower cost level of service, but they're the only ones so far we found that did an actual free tier, and it's working. The reason we started Chattanooga as a model within our port, aside from the fact they're known as gig city, they are the national model in many cases.
Right, absolutely.
Because they took huge risks, and they've gained huge rewards from it, upwards of billions compared to millions to the millions that they spend. Is that the limitation that they had is they had a state law that said they could not offer a lower rate than a private company, than a private firm could.
Okay.
New York State, thank God for small favors, does not have that type of law.
Right.
We could give a lower price. And in one sense, it might be good for the market as a whole, because even people that didn't necessarily buy in, it could force firms like Spectrum to have to adjust their rates downward, because now they've got a competitor who's providing high-speed service at a reasonable price and affordable price. And I think that's where we would gain community support. Even if it wasn't, well, we want to do it because we know it's a good idea from a money point of view. I think you get a lot of private clients choosing to opt in as far as we support the community. That's one great thing about the city of Albany, about the city of the city here, is a lot of the bigger firms that work here, that are based here, have strong ties to the community. So they would view it as a way to support the city and its citizens in an effort, which would then give them sort of a medal they could put on them, that they could put on their site, saying we are supporters of the city of Albany company. So from a marketing point of view, they could be viewed as a friend of the city. Oh, well, we've chosen to switch our internet from Fios to this because, one, it makes sense for us monetarily, but also because we support the city, and in exchange for which the city says, oh, you can put this logo, this logo up on your site. You can brand with it, with our blessing, for as long as this is true. So we saw a soft benefit there. But just so that you know, because I know one of the concerns you've expressed a lot is the affordability and the quality of service. I can assure you that every single person that's on the commission, even those that aren't on now, was on board with, we have to have that affordability concern teamed up with same quality of service. I just want to say that on behalf of our people.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's a great point. I mean, one of the things we were talking about all along was, the challenges when we first did that first study. We did some interviews. We set up a booth during Tulip Fest, right, to get some opinions from the community.
Sure.
And one of the challenges to getting cable, as cable internet through cable, was the requirement for a credit card and credit check. They had that hurt a lot of people. That I get it.
It's a barrier to end.
And so it was something that I think we asked to be put into this as part of the study, to say, listen, this is a challenge. Even if Spectrum could come out and give us high-speed broadband to our house, that, let's say, was even affordable, which again, they're really not. But even if they could, they're making us jump through hoops of,
Providing for it.
credit checks, bank accounts, a lot of things that are tough, for people to meet requirements for people to meet that we don't want.
Right.
So if you want to do business here within our community, you have to change those things.
Right.
And I get all that.
Yeah, no, I think you do. I think, again, I just wanted to reassure you that you're definitely in the right room for that, for that approach. But then I'm just going to go to Diana, because it looked like she had a question.
Yep.
Dave, you want to go ahead? You're on mute, just so you know.
Oh, okay, great. Can you hear me now? All right. So Mark, in your response, you suggested a partnership. I just wanted to know, like, for clarification, what is your expectation of a partnership framework? Is it for like financing, constructing, or operating?
The thought with the partnership was one, I think, like Brian was talking about. And this has changed, Diana, this has changed my thought on it, as far as I wanted to initially get specific, with a request. But then it was like, with all these changes in technology and possibilities out there, I thought maybe it'd be better just to be vague, where we're stating in our request for information, that we want a partnership to provide. And listen, I may be too simple on this, and I'm certainly not a politician, but, my thought was an RFI going out there saying, we're looking for somebody to partner with the city of Albany that could provide the high-speed internet service as defined by us. So we specifically state what we're expecting as far as speeds up and down, and, our affordability expectations or requirements that we have, and what we could bring to the table, right? Our buildings, like the assets you're talking about, the buildings, the right-of-ways,
Vertical,
partnerships that we have existing, and even our business as a city, right? We spend thousands of dollars on network connectivity tens of thousands every month, right? So we would bring our business to the table, and then just simply say, what can you offer us?
Like cast like a white net.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Wide net. Again, I'm offering just one thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. It's not the thought. It's one thought.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, because if you think about a lot of this new stuff that's landing, think about just when you look around with the 5G millimeter stuff that's been dropped all over the city, right?
Yeah.
There isn't a guy in Verizon headquarters who's twiddling every one of those things. That's a cloud management thing. A lot of the cost structure for this type of infrastructure has been pushed down by what's happening in industry. And we may find, if we ask the question in a way that, may more vague, or whatever the right terminology is, right?
Mhm.
We might be surprised what we find out, because I don't think the cost structure is as high as it is to run, trench streets and have contracts of guys with shovels to dig up fiber optic cable. That's a really expensive business, right? And look at what Verizon's doing. Verizon's shifting away from that. It has like a 40% gross margin to wireless. It has like a 70% gross margin. They're making double the money in every dollar it's spent on wireless, because it saves costs, and now the tech has gotten better.
Sure. All right, Dana, do you have any follow-up question?
Thank you. That was good feedback. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go to Josh next. I know that Josh had a couple questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we were, I came into this meeting with a question, but I think as we've kind of been talking, I feel like I know the answer now. But when I was doing my research, one of my tasks for the report was the comparison communities. And it seemed like almost, if not all, most of the communities we were looking at that were providing municipal internet also owned or supplied their own power.
Right.
So I, for the past couple months was thinking that that was going to be a really big barrier for us, like, or a hurdle that we'd have to jump over. But yeah, I mean, as we've been talking about how technology has changed, and every day it seems to be advancing, do you think that that is as big of a hurdle as it once was, maybe 5 or 10 years ago? Or do you think that now, like with the mesh network or whatever other solutions there could be out there, it might be less of a hurdle than it used to be?
I mean, one of the things that Verizon said to us a number of years ago when they basically said what they thought the investment was going to cost and that they didn't want to make it. I think part of their thought process on that, Joss, was they could see way ahead of us, like Brian is talking about with wireless and what its capabilities were going to be and what that cost structure and profit margin was going to be. And I think they just, they had that advantage and they saw that and they were like, something, we're not going to be doing files much more all over the country because this other technology is, really starting to provide the speeds that people are expecting in their homes. And, also, and this is this sounds a little crazy, but I've been around long enough to see the crazy become reality. I'm always thinking of fiber in the home and, I've got my 1 gig connection in the home. Why can't I buy internet access and have it when I walk out the door? Right? Because we're all usually on our mobile devices, even when we're in our home, right? So if I'm paying for a 1 gig internet connection inside my home, why can't I have that, when I'm over in Washington Park,
Sure.
right? Because I'm a subscriber. Those things are going to begin to mesh where you're going to get that, like T-Mobile's talking about that type of service now. Of where they're giving you the wireless into the home, but I also they want to make wireless asset. They already had that wireless infrastructure set up, within, at least in our community, some parts of our community, and that's future thinking, but that's part of probably what's going to become the norm, and these companies see that, and also, and again, I said this, one of the values I think in doing an RFI. Maybe we're just not getting anything that sounds good to us. So when we're going for a grant or we're trying to get our legislative ducks in order, for a type of an authority, to me, we got more ammo because we're saying, hey, listen, we tried basically everything else. We reached out directly to the vendors and said, help, here's what we bring to the table. What can you bring to the table? And don't forget, one of the things I want to put in the grant is any grants that we as a government may be able or may be entitled to, which they're not necessarily entitled to, we could bring that to the table as well. Sure. I mean, one of the things, Craig, that where we took advantage of this a number of years ago, when I was at the county around, when a lot of money came out, emergency money after 9/11. Yeah. Right. Those grants came from the federal government to the county and then were distributed.
Big bucks.
One of the things that we did was, rather than do this ourselves, because we just didn't have the capacity to do it, and I'm talking about the county at the time, but we paid First Light to run fiber, dark fiber, like between Albany police stations, right, in downtown Albany, and also going from 112 State Street out to Voorheesville. Yeah. There's fiber that, we paid for through a grant. First Light put it on the poles. Yep. But we paid for, access to that, to parts of, I think they ran 144 strands of fiber. We have access to just 6 of those strands. Right. But they would have never run that fiber from Albany to Voorheesville. Voorheesville is where the sheriff's office is located. Right. And that's where happens to be our disaster recovery site for the city. Yeah. I mean, that came from a partnership, right? Where we got the grant, couldn't think we could get the, we didn't have the tools to put the fiber into the ground or anything. So we partnered with First Light, and they put fiber between South Station and police headquarters, communications and police headquarters on, at that time was over on 165, South Station, 165, West Station. We
Yeah.
got fiber, directly to that, coming, back down to downtown. And that's the way that, how we built that infrastructure out. And that was at the time, I think somewhere between, I think the county might have paid $350,000
That makes sense.
from that grant to get the fiber into the buildings.
Mhm.
Now I'm not at the county, I'm at the city, but I'm using that fiber. We
Sure.
use that between all of our police departments and the sheriff's department out in Voorheesville.
Right. I think that's and that's a good point, because I think First Light, Josh, refresh my mind, that First Light was one of the firms that we saw had worked with some of the communities that we looked at as they did the actual fiber laying for us. Because the chief problem that we have with looking for communities to compare to, March, and just is it certainly in the northeast, most of the places that do it are significantly smaller than the city of Albany. We're talking like 10% of our size. So finding a good orange to orange, apple to apple comparison was challenging. We found some, but I think that you make a very good point. I mean, the idea of someone like a First Light, certainly, if we take the example of the city department of general services, for a lot of things that they do themselves. They have staff that does these things, but with some of the snow plowing, some of the street reconstruction, if not street repair, they contract with private firms that do that.
Absolutely.
But it's still a city job. It's city work. It's city money that goes to do this. In a sense, if we were to create an authority, it would be the same model. So someone like First Light, okay, the authority says we'll contract, we'll do the RFI, we'll contract with First Light to lay this cable or lay this fiber for us.
Yeah.
If we go that way. And this is what we're looking to do. The other advantage is right now, if the authority says, well, we represent the city, which is let's say 100,000 people. Yeah, that's a good thing. And yes, we have the city of Albany as a client. That's big too. But if we're the authority where we have an agreement with the other towns in the county to represent the county, now we're representing 30 million people, let's say, not that many, but still. That's a much bigger lure for a private firm.
Absolutely.
So, okay, it's worth it to us to bid on that because we're going to make money on that no matter what happens with them on the back end. We know that we're going to get our money up front to lay this fiber, provide these services. And at the same time, because like the government model is, we bundle contracts sometimes to get a better rate. Okay. So we say, well, if it were just the city of Albany, then would they charge us $80 a foot? But if we're representing the county, they'll charge us $40 a foot because they know they're still going to get a lot more feet out of it.
Okay.
I'm thinking, again, that's an old school model of, that goes back to Corning and before, but still, you make the deal, you make the contract.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's the thing we're looking for. And as Martin said, one of the concerns we had with putting costs in the preliminary report is really what we were doing with the preliminary report. That's why the feedback from you and from the mayor and from the common council is really critically important from our point of view. Is we said, here are the choices. You give us a sense of what your preferred way to go is, and we'll cost that out. If you say, well, give us two, okay, that's more work, but we'll cost out both. And say, okay, here's what we think is going to be the better model for these reasons. But Martin's concern, I think, was a valid one, is, the other problem we have, not to put too fine a point on it, is there is no budget for this commission whatsoever.
Right.
And you're looking at the list of people who are working on this in addition to their full-time jobs and all that. The nice thing about being retired is I have a little more time on my hands, but still, we are trying to reach out to different parts of city government and say, can you help us out with this when
Yeah.
you get the time to work this in? Whereas if they start to use some of the city resources on a personnel side to do some of this research, I think we can get a more targeted kind of the specific costs that you were looking for a grant app, for that you'd expect with a grant request. Okay, here's what we're seeing. Here's our due diligence piece. Here's our proof of concept piece. Here's our potential client list with whom we have we have non-binding agreements at this point. We don't know if we're going to be able to do it. That if we can do it, they've agreed to be part of this. Please now give us a large pile of money, please. And there are both federal and state grants, and that's just for broadband specific. If we go to the Reddick and say, well, it's an economic development tool, okay, there's another pot of money. And with the feds, it's the USDA grants for rural broadband. It's this agency for actual city broadband. And we can stitch together something that may make this a workable model, at least for the construction of the network itself. The day-to-day staffing is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah. I mean, I got one other thought for you guys. I will, and I don't know if we can do this or not, but it's a thought, and I would ask you to participate if you could.
Sure.
On the county side, the committee they have, one of the members, and he may even be the chair, is a guy called Kevin O'Connor.
Yes.
Kevin founded First Light, right? Tech
Yeah.
Valley Communications before it was First Light.
Yeah.
Has a lot of experience. I would like you to, one, have a chance to ask Kevin whatever questions you feel relevant, but also I'd want Kevin to talk to you about an experience that I think it was Tech Valley at the time had trying to build out Burlington, Vermont through an authority, and kind of do what we're talking about doing. I think it would be interesting to hear from him. So Jessica, one of the things I will try to do is to reach out to Kevin to see if he'd be willing to do it. But would you guys be willing to entertain a meeting with Kevin?
I can speak to that a little bit. There was an attempt made back when the county was first starting up its commission, set up at least a preliminary conversation between Kevin and I. And we exchanged emails, and then it never happened. I reached out to him and said, tell me a date that's good for you, and then never heard anything back. So he may have gotten caught up in, because he's a very busy person outside of that, but we would be very open to having him here, to having him in to meet with him privately, as well as here, because I think he does bring an incredible body of knowledge.
And he also, they did put up some money to contract with a company, and I believe it's the same company that the state is going to be relying on to give us, as you were talking about, Brian, maybe some more definitive answers of what currently broadband is available and what actual real speeds are available in certain areas of this, of our city, is what we care about. That company was contracted to do that.
Another thing we're talking to Kevin that he may have some insight into is the whole fiber question, right? He may have some insight. He may not know, but he may have some insight as to, depending on where we target first, like if there's recommendations, but hey, we're going to target these areas of need. There may be dark fiber or provider fiber that's already there. It might be easier to, rent a strand versus because that's a tough business. There's been a lot of consolidation there. Like the like the fiber lane craze is over, right? That's past, right? So there, he may have some insight into that, or like, or if we end up doing an RFI, like who to send it to. So there may be different communities. There may be like the people who own the stuff that's in the ground. There may be people who can provide this end user services. Like there's a lot of,
There
that's the
may
kind of
be.
person that's good to talk to. If we could, that'd be cool.
So Jessica, I will reach out to Kevin because I participated with him on the county side of meetings, and they haven't been meeting in the last couple of months. So I don't know exactly. They were meeting, at least once or twice a month before that. But I will reach out to Kevin if you guys are willing.
Please, yes.
And he can coordinate through Jessica what your schedule will be.
I think that makes sense. Jess, if we can, if Kevin's willing to let him know that that I'll make time available outside, but I think if we could have him into a meeting as well, if he's available, that would be great. The other thing we can do is forward on to him a copy of the preliminary report that we sent in, so that he can familiarize himself with that. And get a better sense of what he might be able to speak to or have questions himself about. Because Kevin is also, that's the interesting thing, is we want to hear from as many people as we possibly can on this.
Right.
And as I say, given his expertise, not just with First Light, but as president of, I believe, was the Center for Economic Growth.
Yeah.
I have tremendous respect for his knowledge and his experience. I mean, I have to say, I've never read something that he weighed in on that I did not almost completely agree with his point of view.
So Jessica, I will reach out directly to Kevin. I will supply the document that you guys put together,
Great.
With your permissions.
Sure, please.
With your permission, and I'll let you coordinate that as far as availability.
Okay, that
Great.
sounds good.
Great. So that's it. Are there any more questions for Kevin? I'm sorry, for Kevin. For Mark at this point? No? Okay. Mark, do you have any questions for us or any final?
No. Listen, I as I said in the memo, and I hope I didn't say it strongly enough, but when I read the report, I know we went out and did the study before that, and we spent money on it. And when I read your report, I was like, wow, I know you guys have no resources.
Yeah.
And I was quite honestly amazed at the amount of work that you did and the detail that you have in it. I applaud you. I truly do. And again, I was just giving one opinion, not the opinion.
No, I think
whatever you guys feel strong about, put it forward.
Yours is a very valued point of view. I think that I'd like to convey that. And yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I'm very proud of this group as a whole. I don't think there's anyone here who hasn't stepped up above and beyond, and under some incredibly challenging circumstances at times. But I was very proud of the product that we've produced so far. And I think our goal is to produce, if possible, an even better final version of the report, which is due just after the first of the year. Then the commission will continue to exist for 6 months beyond that to deal with any follow-on questions or any specific requests that the city may have for us. But yeah, I think, definitely we're all committed to the same goals.
Yep.
We'll find the best path of getting there. And that's the challenge for us all. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and for giving us the feedback that you have, and for your willingness to reach out to Kevin. That would be great. That'll help us keep this process moving forward. So again, thank you very much for your time, sir.
No, again, thanks for inviting me. And if you got any questions, I'm certainly in the office every day.
Definitely.
Call or shoot me an email.
We will indeed.
All right. Thank you. See you, Justin.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. That said, another thing, Brian, I know that at one point you had a couple thoughts of people that may want to make presentations to the group.
I bumped into an old colleague's probably the wrong word, but someone I worked with in the past who It was at Intel, and apparently this is a business area that they have a presence in, and she had mentioned that there was potentially, an interest in, they're very interested in the thing. They're focused on edge computing, so they're I think their focus is some of it is similar to what NIPA stuff was talking about, where like it's a multi, I can't remember the name of it, but in New York City they have the oh geez, they have like Wi-Fi points, but they're also like information boards, and they can do like public message, public safety messaging and stuff like that.
Smart board setups.
Yeah, so I think that was one of the early use cases, but there's other things that they were interested in, so they may have an interest in speaking. And I think, I don't know what the right way to engage is, but I know that there is a lot of activity happening in this private. There's actually, it's almost like, this is the wrong terminology, but it's almost like CB radio, where there's a portion of the 5G spectrum that's for public, it's like dedicated to public use. And that's where a lot of this this private Wi-Fi stuff is. And my understanding, I'm learning a little bit more about it. It's an interesting space because I have some professional interest in it as well. But there's a lot of options out there for it. I think Amazon is working in some states at a lot of school districts and like campus environments, but it's just something that can scale out further. These 5G, you have a little 5G modem that you could put in the window type of thing to get speed access. The other thing that was interesting there was it is mostly cloud based. What was the other interesting thing there? Oh, they have the ability to interact with the broader cell phone network. So in a scenario, and that what I thought was interesting is like, hey, if we have these, the city is a hard time capitalizing. So there's a grant that's targeting, like you mentioned, like, USDA cares about rural communities. If there's some thing like Department of Education is targeting certain communities that are high risk because of school related issues, right? It might be possible to leverage something like that, like locally. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how to. Yeah, I don't know what the whole story is, but it may be something interesting because this is it's an area that's really developing, and I guess that high frequency Wi-Fi is so fast, it's incredible, but it requires that line of sight, right? And the asset the city has are these metal poles, right? So it's an interesting, you think about like, what do we have to offer, right? We have this infrastructure, there's a political willingness to do stuff, which is amazing, right? Right. And so maybe there's an opportunity there to do it lighter weight, like, think of even like the city traffic cameras, like those traffic cameras, they're just using cellular service to be managed, right? So if you could do something like that, but have it provide something, not a revenue generator, reverse ATM kind of scenario, and public safety scenario, but like we can provide a service through this, might be an option. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because Clary is investing bazillions, like literally tens of billions of dollars are being invested in this stuff right now.
I would say, if they'd like to come in and talk to us about what they're doing, I think that's a thing that we can do. I mean, as I said, I think one of the things I said to you privately is that, we certainly, it needs to be clear to them, we're in no position to make a decision of, oh yes, let's spend money on this. That's not our role.
Exactly.
But I mean, from an informational point of view, we definitely be intrigued. I think, again, we're trying to gather as much information as we can. Jess, I would think if they could coordinate that through use you as a point of contact to have them come to a meeting, that would probably be the most efficient way.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Let me reach out to them again. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but I'll give her a buzz and see, if there's an interest or there is an interest, right? Just validate that, have them reach out.
See if there's a date that works, and we'll go from there. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and if we end up doing an RFI or whatever we do, right, it can only help to have some, right? You ask the right questions, it helps the vendor community or whatever community it is that's responding to these sorts of things.
Absolutely.
It helps them figure it out,
Yeah. I just want to speak to one thing, because Josh, one of the questions that you had asked Mark was about communities that have their own power grid and how is that a barrier. In the past, I believe the main reason that you saw it grow in those communities, from what I've been reading, is that because one of the things that Mark alluded to earlier, they own the poles. That's the chief advantage. But as we're going away from pole-based Wi-Fi as a possibility, and going just to a straight wire to a straight wire Wi-Fi, then the necessity of the poles becomes less. So I think it's less of a barrier than it might have been at one time. But I think it was a good question to ask. It's just, that's one of the things that I found out recently. Oh, this is why, because they own the polls, which makes sense. The good news is we own some polls, just not all of the polls. About 50% is a little less than 50% is what we own at this point. So that said, I think we had I think Mark was great, gave us some really great feedback. I hope it addressed the questions that people had.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think it gave us some threads to pull as we move ahead towards the final report. Things to think about, things to take into to account. My hope is that when we do the meeting with the Common Council on the 13th, we can get more specific feedback from them as to the questions we raised with our report, which I think Martin spoke to some of your questions to Mark and some of your responses. Well, we didn't do a cost out because we weren't sure what they prefer. And I think you were offline when I spoke to that a little bit with Mark. We presented, here are ways that you can go. Here's what we suggest. Do you want that, or do you want something else, before we go to the added work of adding the specific costs to the report? My suspicion is that we may get at least the start of that at the caucus meeting on the 13th. I expect we'll have a follow-up response in writing from them. Certainly that will be what I'll push for at that meeting. Really, we should have had one before this. I'm surprised that we don't, based on some conversations I had with people on the Common Council, who thought that their research attorney was in the process of trying to write a draft of that about a month and a half ago. But it's also the season 4 city budget, so I'm sure they've had a very full plate with that. So hopefully we get this in now. Now, as I said, the proposal from the council was to meet with them on October 13th at 5:30 p.m. My question is that a date that works for you all?
I'll make it work. Yes. And will it be down?
It'll be at City Hall in the caucus room itself, up on the, I think it's the second floor. And I'll be down in the main area. For anyone that's confused, I'll walk you upstairs that night, so that we're all there on time. So if you get there between 5 and 5:30, then we'll just go upstairs, and when they're ready to listen to us, there's a place to sit in the back of the room, and then they sit at a table usually in the main part of the room. They may want us to come into the main area once we actually have our part of the conversation with them, because we won't be the only thing that they're doing that night. But it's not as formal as a city council meeting. It's sort of a semi-formal kind of a thing. So questions will come from any one of the 15 people that are on city council, or from the president of the Common Council, or from their research attorney, who I expect will be present as well. The public can attend. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I doubt they'd be there for us, but they might be there if there's a different issue that's up that night. The public doesn't have the ability to speak at the caucus session itself, but they may speak to us off the side when we're done. So that may be something that Chris may have a specific question. So depending on how comfortable you are with dealing with that, I'd say that's your call totally. More likely they'll be there because they have a street project that they're worried about, or a city budget matter that they're concerned about. As I say, we're there more from an informational point of view. So Jess, if you can attend that as well, the one thing I would ask, if you can arrange to have copies made for the Common Council just in case they don't have it, of the preliminary report, so we can make sure that there were enough for all of them that night, and then for
Okay.
us as well, just so we can reference it if we need it, if we get a question about our particular section. I
Okay.
think that would be a help. So I know Dana can attend. Josh, do you think you can make that one?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be there.
They will. Josh, Martin, what about you?
I will.
Yep, I should be able to make it.
Great. Okay, Josh.
I'll double check. I'll let you know.
Okay,
I
great.
think I should, but I'll double check.
I had brought it up to Jeff. I haven't heard back from him, but I think he will be back in time to do that. And we'll see if Ed's available. But beyond that, I think we're in pretty good shape. The other thing which I do plan to bring up that night is the fact that we still have several vacant spots on this little band of ours. And certainly as we approach the final report, we could use some extra hands. So I will bring that up with them again as well, because technically they're the point people for filling those. What the interesting thing for me in Mark's presentation too was that he was clear that this was his feedback on the report. So technically, we still don't have specific feedback from the mayor on this, which I would expect we would have. She may have thought that Mark's was sufficient and addressed her concerns, but that may be a reach out that we want to do as well. Reach out to Rachel, Dave, and the mayor to say, we have this from Mark. What are there any questions that you had? Because we'd like your feed because we would like your feed. We would like your feedback.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yes. Okay. All right.
I can reach out to them tomorrow, just to see if they have anything in the works.
Great. If you just see me on that,
Sure.
be great. All right. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up? No? Okay. Well, if we all agree that we're finished, here's the other thing, and I'm going to bring in justice. We can continue to do virtual meetings like this, but technically, the executive memo that allowed us to do virtual meetings has expired. As long as we don't vote on a motion, the legal opinion we have is that we can continue to meet in this format. I think it might make sense for us to meet in person at some point, but I think right now this seems to work best for all of you. If that's true, or if you prefer to meet in person, we can certainly start to set that up. But just, so when I say, usually I would say at the end of the meeting, do we have a motion to close the meeting? I will not be using that phrase. Let's say, do we all agree that we're pretty much done with what we needed to discuss? If you nod like you are right now, we can end the meeting. But I think we should talk about in-person meetings as we get nearer to when we're ready to draft the final one, because it would be nice to sit in the same room and say hi. And two, I think it will give us a chance to give the public a chance to come someplace and possibly weigh in on some of the things that we're talking about, which certainly is a component that we want to do as well. Does that make sense to all of you? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, well, then if we are finished, Jess, I think we can end this one. The only other thing I was going to say is, for the time being, we have a meeting twice a month because we're preparing the preliminary report. I'm going to suggest that we, for the immediate time period, go back to one meeting a month or one meeting every 3 weeks or so that we're making a more productive use of our time. It will allow sub-teams to meet on their own between meetings, so that you're not burdened down. Oh God, I've got a meeting every night this week. I have no time for my own life, and that's terrible. And then we can go back to two meetings when we get closer to when we're drafting, if that makes sense to you all.
Yeah, I think that's a good frequency. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. I will say then, just let's cancel the meeting on October 5th.
Okay.
So we're going to have the caucus meeting with the Common Council on the 13th. We'll keep the meeting after that, and that'll be our meeting for the month of October. And then let's look at picking one meeting date, maybe mid-November for November. It's sort of mid-December for that month. Because you're up against the different holidays at that point of the year, and things get tougher.
So we do have one scheduled already for November 16th,
Perfect.
which is a good week before the holidays.
Yeah, well, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep that date. All right. I think that's all I've got for right now.
Would you like me to send out an email to the commission members that aren't here, just explaining the invite we got to the council?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I really
Okay.
want them all to know so we can get them together.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. Okay, I think that's the full list that I had. Thank you all for your time and for meeting with Mark. I think it was a very productive session across the board. And I hope that he's able to convince Kevin to come and meet with us. Jess, if there's a date that works for Kevin that we're not meeting yet, we can certainly look at doing that, because that's worth it to set up a special meeting to pick his brain.
Okay.
And we can work out, we know what the best night is for most of the group. Let's pick that night, but a date that works on that.
Okay.
And we'll go from there, and we'll let people know if that occurs. All right.
Sounds
All right,
good.
folks. Again, thanks very much for your time. Great job.
Thanks.